Is it okay to come out? Is it okay to come out? Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever felt that way, that there's just certain aspects of your life that you want to hide because there's certain things attached to it that you don't want to expose to the light? Well, we're going to demystify that 800-pound gorilla of shame because, well, shame erodes so much of our lives. Oh, before I go any further, hey, my name is Jeff Faldalen. Welcome to the show. I'm known as the Potential Architect and the founder of New Concept Coaching and the creator of Synergistic Behavioral Engineering. And in this show, we are going to learn how to demystify this 800-pound gorilla of shame. And what does shame, why is it important to understand what shame does? See, and it's really important for us to, first of all, right out of the gate, for us to acknowledge that before we can change something, we have to first have the ability to acknowledge that it even exists. And that's what I'm here to do, because without acknowledging this thing, we do not understand the insidious impact that it has within our lives. And, well, what does shame do in our lives? Well, let's see. There's so many aspects that shame covers up within our lives that it doesn't give us ability to press into our fullest potential. For example, there are things that has happened in our past that we don't want to look at, and because the reason we don't want to look at it is what shame comes in, and we put shame around this one particular incident, and therefore we do not want to look at it. We want to push it away from ourselves, and that's exactly why it is so important for us to look at what shame does in our lives. And I believe that unconsciously, if we do not get conscious about the unconscious shame that we have within ourselves, that we will be on this path of doing everything we can to protect it. And then when somebody pushes that button of shame, we explode, we will react. So let me think about it. So what are some of the areas of our lives that we can have shame in? Well, how we raised our kids, how we performed in a marriage, how we handle our finances, how we see ourselves intellectually, how we see ourselves as a person and whether we're good or not, what kind of partner we are, what kind of businessman are we, what is our relationship to money. All of these things are influenced by shame. And it's really important for us to ravel it down. And what I do with my clients is, so if we look at this, let's look at this as shame, or whatever we is. Actually, this is the thought, and the shame is what we do to protect that thought of looking at it. So my life has been riddled with shame. I think I have a PhD in shame somewhere, self-proclaimed. But if I look back on my life, there was some amazing things that happened in my life that really changed the trajectory of my life. My parents divorced when I was fairly young, and back in those days when I was a kid, I didn't understand what was really going on, but I knew the kids at school's parents were married, and because of that, I felt shame. I felt shame of what was going on in my house, so I began to recluse, to pull in some of these things that happened in my life, and because of that, it started causing some internal conflicts that I wasn't aware of until much, much, much later. And so that's where this whole process began. And I was challenged as a kid. I was moved many times. I had many different things going on. And this isn't about blaming anybody. It's just talking about what was going on inside of me. Well, then I ended up having a car accident when I was 19 years old. And in that car accident was the beginning of the awakening that took me to where I'm at today. And in that car accident, I almost killed my sister, which took my shame to an entirely different level. I never in my wildest dreams ever thought that I would do something like that to my sister. Myself, it wasn't that big a deal. I mean, I ended up breaking my neck. I ended up compound fracturing my leg. But it was what I did to her that really, really messed things up for me. Messed things up in a way. It stirred things up and allowed me to really start getting honest with myself. Well, because of my broken neck, I had my necks all fused together, and it's funny how far the shame can go, because back in those days I used to have really long hair, and what they had to do is they had to shave the whole back of my head, obviously, to operate on my neck. But I didn't want to cut this side, so I had hair down to here, and I had all this shaved in the back. And didn't realize what was driving that. I mean, it was, I think back of it now, and I've been thinking about what I was going to talk about on the show, and I was just like, wow, that is just so crazy how much this stuff drives us. Well, let's fast forward. I ended up getting clean and sober, back a few years after that. And it was shortly after I got sober that I went through one of the most challenging times of my life. The car accident was probably the most challenging and the most amazing thing, most powerful learning lesson that I ever had in my life. But then I stepped into something else. And this was because now I wasn't drinking. And now I had to face my emotions. And what came about was I started going bald. And whoa. I was I was suicidal. Wasn't tempted to drinking. Because of what had happened to that car accident, temptation of drinking for me or doing drugs just wasn't there for me anymore. But I was suicidal. I didn't know how to handle this. And I was just like, what in the world is going on with this? Why am I having such a difficult time with this? Started having all these crazy illusions, not ever going to be loved again, nobody's going to think I'm attractive, blah, 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 and started feeding these stories on and on and on. And really had a difficult time with that. I mean, I did some pretty absurd things back in those days, and this was when I think in my mid-20s when this was going on. But I continued going forward. I kept moving forward. I was going through some major therapy. I was going through a lot of different stuff in my life. And I started understanding this thing called shame. And there is nothing more insidious in our lives than shame. Shame, to go to a complete extreme, shame will cause people to commit suicide, just like what was going on with me. I didn't know how to deal with this. And I want to identify, I looked up shame before I started this, because some people conflict shame and guilt, and I wanted to define what shame means. And this is a noun. It says a painful feeling arising from the consciousness of something dishonorable, improper, or ridiculous. Susceptibility to this feeling to be without shame, or disgrace, or a fact or circumstances bringing disgrace or regret. And that is what they define as shame. So guilt, the fact or state of having committed an offense, a crime, a violation, or wrong, especially against moral or penal law. A feeling of irresponsibility or remorse of some offense, crime, or wrong. So there are definitely differences. And guilt, in a way, and we'll talk about that on a different time, but guilt actually can serve us in a way. But with shame, if you look at Dr. Hawking's level of consciousness, the very low bottom one is shame. Because I think shame destroys more marriages. I think shame destroys more businesses. And this is the reason why. I believe, this is just my personal belief, I believe that most men struggle with, well, some of it anyway, of erectile dysfunction is because of shame. See, and this is one of the areas within marriages. If there is shame within a man, and most men, okay guys, listen to me if you're listening to this, and women, pay attention, because this is some of what's going on with men. Most men do not know how to deal with their emotions. And because society, whatever, conditioning or whatever, they want to go into this cave and they don't want to embrace this shame. And then somebody tries pushing in to that feeling or that emotion, they feel threatened. And what happens is the yang energy just comes up and just comes alive, and I got to protect myself. But they don't go through what that looks like of letting go of that shame, because that shame, they just want to do everything they can to protect that shame. And of course, women are more nurturing and loving and caring, the yin energy. And then you have the yang is the more powerful, the more get things done, the more dominating kind of energy. And you have this conflict. And I truly believe that the number one reason for marriage, the divorce, is because of communication. And it's understanding the difference between these two forces. But it's based around shame, especially men that have been molested. Not really understanding what it means to be a man, not really understanding this energy that they have and how to embrace a woman. I mean, there's men out there that have fantasies or want to try different things with their wife, but because of their shame, they won't share that with them, and this is where affairs come along. Or a woman, how she sees herself, and having a man wanting to embrace her and love her and appreciate her and cherish her body and things like that. If she has shame issues around that, she's going to want to cover up. See, this is what's really important to understand about shame, is that shame wants to remain in the darkness. It wants to remain in the darkness. And because of that, it wants to pull back, and then it wants to convince you of whatever you are ashamed of to stay in that darkness. See, so let's think about one of the most well-known stories, I believe, just my own personal opinion, of how this world started. And you can look at it literally, you can look at it metaphorically, however you choose to look at it, whatever it means to you. But let's talk about Adam and Eve, okay? Adam and Eve, so let's talk about what was the temptation. And again, this is not about God or Bible or theology or religion or anything like that. Let's just look at it metaphorically. What was the temptation that took place? What was the temptation? The temptation was, first of all, let's look at what tree the serpent was in, the serpent being Satan. The serpent was in the tree of knowledge, okay? And God warned him, do not eat from that tree. Well, what was the temptation? The temptation was you could become like gods. That was the temptation. Fruit was eaten, and God comes and looking for him later and calling out in the garden, and all of a sudden they show up and they have fig leaves on. And God says, how come you have fig leaves on? And they said, because we were naked. Now this is a very important part of this. God asks, who told you you were naked? Who told you you were naked? See, when the fall took place, and again, you can believe whatever you want to believe about this, is that when the fall took place, ego entered man. And it's ego that drives shame. It is ego that tells us we are not worthy. It is ego that tells us that we should hold this back. It is ego that keeps us in darkness. And if we think about that, darkness has to be seductive in order for it to be invited into our world. So this is why it is so imperative for us to embrace shame and really look at what is it doing in our lives. Because understand, we have three bodies, my friend. We have the physical body, we have the emotional body, and we have the spiritual body. And that means if we do not keep all of those in balance, think about what happens when a wheel is out of balance. It will fly out of control. Same thing with our lives. So it's really important for us to embrace this thing called shame, because shame shows up in shadows. And if you're talking to a person and they're say you're talking about parenting and you're talking to a good friend of yours about parenting, and all of a sudden they start getting defensive, that might be attached to the shame they feel about being a good person or being a good parent or being a good wife, whatever that is. So it's really important for us to look at this thing called shame. And how we can do that is, first of all, we got to acknowledge it, right? We can't run away from, we can't heal something that we won't first acknowledge. So first thing we want to do is we want to acknowledge it. What is the shame? And then we want to go a little bit further and go, where did that shame come from? Where did we take that on? Because there was actually a time in your life that you didn't know what shame was. And then it's called gestalt therapy, where you took that shame on, and then from that point on, it's how you filtered everything in your life. And this is important because shame had a huge impact on my creativity. Because of what I associated with being an artist or being creative, and it had a huge impact on me, and I wanted to do everything I could not to touch that shame. So again, first of all, we got to acknowledge it. Then we want to press in and find out, where did this come from? Because how many times have we heard you should be ashamed of yourself? You should be ashamed of yourself. Who said that? And why is that important? See, if we don't address this, then we can actually be manipulated. And people with well intentions and good intentions are some of the people that told us those things because they wanted to guide us and direct us to be safe. Okay? It's all good. Don't worry about it. But it's understanding they had good intentions on sharing some of this stuff with us. So it's really important for us to understand that. And where did we hear it? Who said that? And then being able to loosen up. Again, so is loosening up that model of the world of what shame has and how it binds us. Because if there's something that you want to tell your person that you love, I encourage you to step into that model and really see. With men, they don't want to share what's really going on with them inside of them because they want to respect their wives. They want to respect this image that they have of them, and yet if they don't get real with it, they get addicted to pornography. They have an affair. They start drinking more. They start working more. Shame is insidious, and if we do not approach it and start looking into it, it will control our lives. This is one of the areas that I work with so many of my clients, is how much shame controls them. Destroys businesses. Shame has, if we look at shame, let's look at, and the more we can look at it objectively, the more impact we're going to have on it, because we want to overwhelm the shame. We want to get it out of us. So if we look at shame like a tapeworm, what a tapeworm will do is actually release chemicals within the body of the host to make it crave what that tapeworm needs. And what that needs will kill the host. So that's actually, if we can look at what shame does to us, is that the darkness is coming in. We've got to get it out of us, and we've got to quit giving it that power. And again, the ego is all about shame. You shouldn't do it that way. You should do it this way. You should, and that's all shame stuff around us. So we need to look at really inventory how we talk to ourselves. One great way to start doing it is saying, I love you. When was the last time you looked in the mirror and said, I love you? When was the last time? Now, some people might think that's hokey. Well, okay. Is it hokey to say you are a worthless piece of blah, 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 blah? How many times have you said that to yourself? Stand in the mirror and say, I love you. Start nurturing who you are. This is so hugely important because this is what causes us to react when somebody else points something out to us. And the reason we react is because we believe it. So if you are a Hispanic person, and I tried to convince you that you were blue, you wouldn't be offended by that because you know your truth. You know you're Hispanic. If you're a white person, Caucasian, and somebody tried to convince you that you were purple, you wouldn't be offended by it. You're just like, man, that's ridiculous, whatever. Same thing is if somebody tells you that you're not loved. If you know you're loved, you will not be offended by it. That's why I say when you react to it is because you believe it. That is, our emotions are what causes us to react in things. So if we don't deal with this shame, it will control our lives. And I'm not saying that you're free from that. I encourage you to really look into where does it come from? Face this thing because it's an 800-pound gorilla. And the more you learn to love the shadow of you, the negative parts of you, if you will. I don't call them negative parts because it's what makes you. The shame in my life is what's driven me to become who I am today, to face these things and let go of them and then teach other people how to do it. This is why I coach people the way I do, is because I don't want people to experience the darkness of being ridiculed and overwhelmed with shame and doubt and all the things that where I was at in my life. I want to empower people, and that's what I want to do with you. So acknowledge it. First thing is to acknowledge it, and then where did it come from? Where did it come from? Who said that? Where did it start from? And then I want you to face it. You can do that through journaling. You can do that through visualization. You can actually visualize talking to the person that used to say those kinds of things, whoever it is. It's not a matter of seeing. And another part of that is that we end up creating complexities around people that were significant in our lives, and we don't want to go, well, if I do this, then I'm going to be rejected. See, the fear of rejection is based out of shame. It's based out of shame because think about it. If you love yourself and you're totally cool with who you are and have a great relationship with whatever it is, your higher God, universe, whatever that is for you, you have that relationship with somebody, you're not going to be affected by how somebody sees you. The reason we fear rejection is because of the fear of how we see ourselves and that we're afraid that somebody else is going to see it. That rejection is just an illusion. Now, I'm here to tell you, I'm not going to say that I don't ever experience that. I do. I work on this every single day. So it's really important for you to look at this stuff and really start letting go of the things that hold you back, because I wish for you to step into your fullest potential. That's what I want to do. I don't want you to be in darkness. If you don't want to talk about it, that's what you need to talk about. If there is something that you feel shameful within your life, you need to find somebody and talk about that and let it out, and be very discerning on who you choose to talk about it, because I've experienced it myself where I've shared some very vulnerable stuff with somebody, and how they received it greatly impacted how I shared it next time. So be very, very discerning. If you would like me to send you some resources or communicate with me, however, I'm here to help you. I'm here to serve you how I can. So going back to this bald thing, what was it about this bald thing that really, really, really got me? It was because I had long hair. And that long hair covered up my scar that is in the back of my neck. And it wasn't the scar. It was what I attached to that scar, which is what I did to my sister. That was my shame was being exposed. So obviously I was supposed to go bald, and obviously I've come a little ways with that. And it's my shame got exposed, and we spend so much energy trying to hide our shame, and that's where we need to go. I know this is a challenging video and what I'm talking about, but I really encourage you to look at that, because the shame wants to be healed. It wants to be loved, and we've got to treat it objectively and not want to push it away, because the more we want to push it away, the more it owns us. See, there's a couple things that motivate us, and it's towards, to, or away from. And if we have great resistance about something, there's a reason. And the more we pay attention to that, the more we start seeing our shadows within ourselves. So somebody that would be greatly opposed to be a homophobic, okay, and really pushing away homosexuality is because they haven't come to terms with their own masculinity. I don't want to say masculinity, but their own identity of being a heterosexual. They haven't come to terms with that. And I've had bouts of that within myself of just going, well, what does it mean to think this way or think that way or what? And if I didn't have somebody to work through that stuff, I have confusion. And with confusion, it opens up yourself to be highly suggestible to some other people. Shame had a big part of me with my being bipolar. Is I really struggled with my emotions a lot of my life, and especially after I got clean, because that's why I drank. I was a full-blown alcoholic by the time I was 13 years old, dealing drugs, all kinds of stuff, doing everything I could to check out at a very, very young age. And it took that car wreck to wake me up and start seeing what I was doing with my life and really making some things happen within my life. So that's not the life. It got me to where I'm at today, and I want you to be free. I want you to step into your fullest potential and not have these anchors that hold us back from skyrocketing into the dimensions that we want. So learn to look at what is going on objectively instead of subjectively, being able to look at it just as if you were inventory in your grocery list. Because how to do that is to be able to see yourself that as an object, being able to see that shame as the person that introduced you to shame, whoever introduced that to you, and being able to see it and going, what is this about? And this is going to teach you to be more and more compassionate. It's going to teach you to really understand who you are, because shame affects your business. I mean, if you are a business person, and I mostly work with entrepreneurs, if you have shame in you, it's going to affect your ability to close sales. It's going to affect your ability of what money does for you. It's going to affect your ability with your relationship. If you don't have a thriving, passionate relationship at home, that's going to affect your business. Shame is insidious, and I really want you to be free of it. So if you have any questions, by all means, comment below. And by all means, subscribe to this live feed, because every week, and I've decided that we're going to do this every Wednesday at 2 o'clock on Pacific Standard Time, which is 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock on Pacific Standard Time and 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday. And if you have any questions, by all means, comment below this video, and I will do my best to answer them each and every week. And next week, we are going to talk about labels. How do you label yourself, and what does that do for you? And really looking at that. So if you got any questions about shame, how I can be of service to you, by all means, let me know. Again, subscribe. Please like this video and share it with somebody else, because I promise you there's somebody out there that needs this message of really that challenges shame. And I am here to awaken this planet. I am here to transform this planet. And I would appreciate it if you would align and join with me in doing that. So share this video with somebody that needs to be released of the burden of shame. My friend, I appreciate your time. Again, comment below if you have any questions. And as always, I sign off with live like your life depends on it, because it does. And you deserve to have a rich, fulfilled, rewarding life. Take care, my friend. Thanks for being a part of this. Have a great day.